Good morning, gearheads. Welcome to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM. This is John Massengill. I'm sitting in the studio, and joining me in the studio is Jonathan Green. Good morning, Mr. Green.
Good morning.
I'm excited. We got a Formula One Grand Prix starting in just about an hour, and I am fired up and ready for the fourth round of the season. How about yourself?
I'm more than fired up because I missed one. I missed Portugal.
That's right.
And to be honest, I kind of took a report from everybody else because I watched it in the background while I was at Laguna. And, it didn't seem, because of the result, it didn't seem that exciting. But now I've watched it back, I get it. It was a really good race. And, what a season we've got. I mean, really.
I know. It's incredible. The start to the season, I mean, yes, last week wasn't as fantastic as the first two, but still a great race.
Yeah, no question about it. And Portimao, to me, I hope it kind of sticks because it's a great place in the Algarve. I've been a patron, if you will, since they started. World Superbikes was their first ever event. And so I know the guys there. I know what it means for them to be there.
All right, well, I want to welcome to the show Mr. Bob Varsha. He is on Zoom to join us. Mr. Varsha, how are you this morning?
Moment there. So after a brief panic, I'm glad to be with you again. Yes.
We like to keep you informed.
That's right. Want to keep you on top of the news.
Yeah, that ain't that the truth.
Well, Bob, we were just talking about the first three races of the season. This being the fourth race, we hope we keep up this streak of great Formula One racing. And in fact, I want to jump right into a news story because there was a news story from ESPN talking about the great ratings so far this year. And I took that tweet and I retweeted it under Speed City and I said, great racing matters. Because I don't know for sure, obviously, if that's the case, but it sure can't hurt to have fantastic racing to keep the ratings up.
No question about it. And Bob, we don't need to ask you. This has always been, not a fight, but it's always been something that you are working towards.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a terrific start to the season. Yes, we've seen a lot of the same old faces on the podium, but it's obviously the field has closed up enormously. And the midfield battle is terrific, and I certainly hope we'll see a lot of that in the race today. It's going to be a tough day for these guys. It's going to be warm. It's another track, a bit like Imola, better for bikes than for cars, so passing is very difficult. But this track is very abrasive. Tires are going to be critical. We're going to see multiple pit stops. It's all to play for in this one, with the kids snapping at the heels of the two top teams.
Yeah, I know Bob will concur with this. When back in the day, when we were younger, Spain used to be the sort of benchmark of the start of the European season because it started with Australia and there was flyaways. And because testing took place in Barcelona, they always said, right, this is the start of the real season. And what we meant by that was you were at home, you came from home, what upgrades you needed from the flyaways were available. So we really saw on a track that very rarely gets any weather, and I don't think there's ever been, I think there's maybe been one wet race in 30 races, but you really do get to see how the performance of the cars is working. It's different this year because we started in Bahrain.
Absolutely different, a very different environment, and I'm still not quite clear on why they did that, except for the fact that was going to be the first race of the season. So why not test there and be good to go? It doesn't rain much in Bahrain either. But I'm with you. Barcelona was always a great breath of relief for all the teams because they could bring their trucks, they could bring their massive motorhomes, and these huge prefab modular, business centers or whatever they choose to call them. It really had the feel of a spectacular event rather than something basically coming out of shipping containers.
Yeah, and I think Ocon confirmed it yesterday after qualifying. He basically said, now we know where we are and we are thankful that we are where we are. He felt like he couldn't really judge the car, the Alpine car, and he was fifth fastest, his best ever or equal best qualifying, which I think was superb yesterday. But he kind of confirmed that factor, which is this is a track we know, this is a track we've got catered to. If it runs here, because it's not an easy track and it's got long straights and a lot of technical corners, if the car runs here good, you've got a good car.
Yeah, they didn't have much setup for Bahrain or for Imola or for Portugal, with only a couple of races in all three of those places. So as you say, there's a lot of familiarity here. Even though they didn't test here this year, I think the teams really feel like they're on a solid footing. And it's interesting to see the results of that in qualifying. And as I say, I think it's going to lead to a great race just because people really have a feel for what they're doing.
Well, guys, there's a ton of fun stories this weekend, but none bigger than Lewis Hamilton's 100th pole. And we had a pre-production meeting yesterday, and both of you guys were just going, it's history that you never thought you'd see. Jonathan, you said it when you said you saw Ayrton Senna hit 65, and you thought you'd never see something like this.
I really didn't. And, I think often when somebody's winning all the time, there's a sort of Tom Brady effect of it all, which is you kind of get, oh, come on, we don't want Brady to win again. We don't want Hamilton and Mercedes to dominate again. But it always wasn't that way. When Mercedes first arrived with Michael Schumacher, they were nowhere. And frankly, to get 100 poles, he's been doing it from the get-go. He's been doing it from 2007, 2008 when he arrived at McLaren. This is a guy, what I'm getting at is I like everybody else, kind of put it aside that it's a natural that he's going to get pole. But when you actually sit down and study it and look at yesterday's pole, which, by the way, was the only time a driver has got 2 poles this year because Verstappen and Bottas have both got a pole, it's a lot harder, 0.03 of a second. I mean, the competition has never been fiercer. And I think, sometimes we need to step back and look at Lewis's achievements here and just go, wow.
Yeah, and thinking about the competition, I mean, Max Verstappen arguably is as talented in raw driver as Lewis Hamilton. But think about all the things that are going on here, where with the wind and the weather and all the fact that he does have all this competition. I mean, Bob, it just makes what Lewis Hamilton is doing. I mean, we really can say now at an older age too. It's really astounding, really.
It is. And, I suppose it's human nature to build up our heroes and then try to knock them down when they do exactly why they are our heroes. They do what they do. They go out, they perform, they excel. I've said it often, and I'll say it again. Years from now, when Lewis Hamilton is in the history books, we're all going to want to say, yeah, I saw that. I saw him. I saw Senna. I saw Schumacher. Yes, he went out and did wonderful things each and every week. We would have liked to see a little more variety up front, but this is where Formula One, at its essence, differs from just about every other kind of motorsports. You have to build yourself up. You go out there and you build your own car, you race that car, and if somebody's better than you, you don't appeal to officials to bring them back. You got to get better. And the key element in the equation is the driver, no matter how good the car is. And Lewis has just been a phenomenon. And petty jealousies cannot get in the way of that fact that what he has done with his Mercedes team and that chemistry that makes it, all right, who brought the dog?
Murphy agrees.
Movie line. Yeah, I mean, and Lewis is phenomenal, and I don't begrudge him a bit of his success. I love watching him, just as I loved watching qualifying in the Senna years when he would go out in his McLaren Honda and put up a lap and then sit in the garage, see if anybody could beat it. If anybody did, go out there and beat it. If nobody did, go out there and go faster yet. It's just it's just so much fun to watch.
Yeah, back when Senna was at his prime, of course, it was an hour-long qualifying, and he would do just that. He would go in and set what we would think was a marker, and he would sometimes even take his helmet off and just watch and talk to the crew. And, he knew, and he was ready. He would put the helmet back on if somebody got close or go out again. It was fascinating, and I think that's a part of Formula One. If you're coming new to Formula One, qualifying is the purest form of Formula One because it is out and out, one lap against the world. You got to get it. And Lewis did it yesterday. He performs on a knife edge. He performs when it's needed and on the money every time. I mean, his first time better than his second. And that's the beauty of Lewis Hamilton. And I mean, it is one of those kinds of sport. And I often look at qualifying and I'm actually more excited by the qualifying situation than the race. Because the race, everybody, look, this is a good example. Verstappen is going to make a move into the first corner, which could end in tears. It ended in tears here in Barcelona with his own teammate Rosberg a few years ago. So, the race can, anything randomly, the stats will show, your results, but the pole positions don't lie.
Okay, we have to ask the question that you said if you're new to Formula One. Okay, Jonathan, it's the car. The argument that it is the car. The Mercedes car is obviously incredible.
Very true. Aaron Rodgers, you've got to decide what team you're going to play for and whether they want you to play for them. And what I mean by that, I keep using my football analogies, but it is a Sunday. But the point is, what's great about Formula One is how you position yourself. And that is a part of this sport, which I mean by that, you make a phone call to Ron Dennis at the after the awards when you're 9 and as a Carter and say, I want to race for you. And he says, give me a call when you're 18. And he does, and he gets the job. And McLaren at the top of their game and one of the greatest teams in Formula One. He didn't call them when the Honda days, when they were nowhere, and he went to Mercedes when they were nowhere, but took a shunt on, basically a punt on the fact that they would come good, and they did. Now it's always a gamble, and look what Alonso's doing, coming back from retirement to a team that he's won 2 titles for. But you wouldn't say, looking at the decision he made 2 years ago, it would be necessarily the right one, but it could prove out and out right. Vettel going to Ferrari seemed like a great idea, but now he's at Aston Martin and starting again. So, what you've also got to look with Formula One drivers is the decisions they make and being in the right place at the right time. Yes, he's got the best car, but that's because he's fought for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and Bob, I mean, I know we've talked about the same thing, but what are your thoughts on that same topic, the car versus driver argument?
Well, of course it's about the car, and it's about the driver, and it's about the team, and so on and so on. It's the total package. I mean, look at the Mercedes team. They've got Hamilton doing these wonderful things, and Valtteri Bottas, who is certainly a world-class driver and world championship worthy, he hasn't been able to get those same results. So there's something there other than out-and-out speed. The Mercedes is not always the fastest car in a straight line. It certainly wasn't 2 weeks ago in Portugal, when I think, was it Portugal or Imola, Nikita Mazepin in the Haas was the fastest car in a straight line. And yet he finished, caboose on the field. It's the driver is such an important part of the equation. And I keep thinking about what we saw in qualifying yesterday. And I don't know if they ever nailed down, did Lewis Hamilton go out on a set of used tires late in the Q2 session? And if so, why? And nobody could quite figure out why. Well, I looked at the Pirelli stats this morning, and Lewis Hamilton and a lot of other drivers are flat out of fresh sets of the softest, grippiest compound. So was Lewis, in fact, out there at the request of his team, perhaps, or at his own initiative, to see what you could do on used red tires, the softest red compound, C3, if in fact the race situation called for it? It's about covering your bases, about doing the hidden things, the small things that can add up to victory when it needs to. I mean, I remember Michael Schumacher at the French Grand Prix at Manicourt many, many years ago when Ross Brahm was on the pit wall. He said, Michael, you can win this race, but we need you to go, whatever it was, 0.9 of a second faster per lap for 17 laps. And we all thought, well, I mean, that's impossible. You're going to ask him to qualify for 17 laps? And Michael was like, okay, here I go. And he did it. That's when the magic of the very greatest drivers comes through, because it doesn't always go their way. They have to react. They have to adjust. They have to sense what's going on all around them. And the great ones do that.
Yeah, and I'm talking to Michael, he also did this Grand Prix, Barcelona, if I'm not wrong. Bob will correct me if I am, but I think he did this race in 5th gear one time. He lost 2 gears, and he literally drove round the problem. And he effectively came second in a race where...
With 1 gear.
Well, I mean, I think he could change. Yeah, I think, but I don't remember what it was. 1 gear, but he definitely lost second and third. I mean, it's a gear change every 4 seconds, and he couldn't do it. And you could hear it in the note of the car, and he just drove around. Am I right, Bob? Is that the right? Was it Barcelona?
Yeah, it was a bit. I think it was. I think it might have been 4th gear, but whatever it was, your point is well taken. He did not have the entire gearbox at his disposal. So what do? You figure it out. And the great ones do that.
All right, gentlemen, we got to go to a break. Before we go to a break, I want to talk about CrowdStrike. The Speed City F1 pre-race show on SiriusXM is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Use the cloud to secure your team in the office, at the track, or anywhere with CrowdStrike at crowdstrike.com/anywhere. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our prep for the Spanish Grand Prix in Formula One.
Hello to everyone. This is Gunther Steiner. This is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back. We are 45 minutes or so away from the Formula One Spanish Grand Prix, and it's John Massico sitting with Jonathan Green and Bob Varsha over Zoom. Les Kaiser's got the day off, and Dave O'Neill may join us for the post-show. I want to talk about the circuit because there's a bit of a change from this year to previous years. And Jonathan, we're going to put a graphic up. If you're watching us on social media, we'll put up a graphic and show that corner change. But talk about that, Jonathan.
Yeah, Barcelona is a great Formula One track. Let's first of all say that because of the long front straight and because of the technical way that you go to 2, 3, 4, and then there's some really interesting finish to the line. There's a bit of a Mickey Mouse, as they say, or as Dave O'Neill would say right at the end, that the drivers don't like. But you've got to remember this circuit is used for so many other things. Mainly the mad Spanish MotoGP fans, and given the amount of riders they have, a la Marquez ×2, and so many others, it's a big bike circuit. But sadly, we had a fatality a few years ago, actually at turn 11. And so what they've done is a very tight turn 9, which you accelerate down, which is perfect for the bikes because it means you hurtle down and it's an overtaking pipe. It's good for Formula One too. But what they've done is they've widened it. They've widened the apex of it and made it a much sort of long hairpin, if you will. And it basically means that you've taken turn 10 out, really. And so you kind of flow from 9, under braking, and then accelerate halfway through the apex and sort of accelerate into a long arc through the right-hander 11. And that's kind of it. I think it's an improvement for Formula One, and they've still got the old circuit there, and they'll probably go back to it for bikes. But that's how I read it, and it's certainly been interesting because it has changed it, but not drastically.
Yeah, it looks like they've essentially turned 2 corners into one.
Yes.
I mean, turned 2 corners into one giant corner. Yeah, what were you going to say, Bob?
It shortens up the braking area for the Formula One cars. So some of the drivers are saying, it's a less inviting place to try to make a pass. But it also moves the apex a little bit further up track so they could put a bigger gravel trap around the outside, which is something else the bike racers wanted. So, it's all good.
The end of the
new set of course records coming up today.
Yeah. The end of the track is I don't like. It's two very tight chicanes, which kind of slows you down for the long arc to the last corner. But again, it's also prone for mistakes if you're pushing and you're going for it, or you're right behind the wash of somebody else. So it's horses for courses. You either like it or hate it, but it is what it is. Same for everyone.
Well, guys, we're going to save the full-on qualifying discussion for a little bit later in the show as people wake up and start tuning in. But one thing I definitely want to talk about is Yuki Tsunoda did not have a great day yesterday on the track or off the track. Bob, I know that you and I were talking about this yesterday. What do you think about young Mr. Tsunoda's response to what happened on track?
Well, I think in the big picture, we're looking at a young guy, 20 years old or so, who has been watching Formula One and listening to Formula One drivers his whole life. And my personal theory is that young drivers start to act, they learn their habits from those who came before. And if, Michael Schumacher does it or Lewis Hamilton does it, then I'll do it. Or if AJ Foyt does it or whatever. So Tsunoda was very unhappy with his race car. He's fluent in English swearing. We all found out.
Well, he worked for Carlin. That's probably part of his problem.
And he got on the radio and trashed the car. So he was so frustrated with it. His engineer had to tell him to calm down. And then he got out of the car and had plenty of time to cool down as he walked over to the interview corral since he was knocked out in Q1. And there he suggested that possibly he didn't have the same race car his teammate did. And that was where he kind of crossed the line, I think. You don't trash your team. You don't impute motives to your team. You win or lose as a team. So, you can be as mad as you want, but close the garage door and talk it over. So I think Tsunoda learned a hard lesson there. He came on Twitter shortly afterward to apologize. Whether someone got in his ear and said, you need to do this or not, I don't know. But, sometimes the lessons of Formula One and life are harder than some of the other ones. So yeah, Sonoda kind of blotted his copybook. He's frustrated. He had 2 or 3 great races to start his Formula One career. He's struggling with the car right now, and how do you react? That's something every young driver has to learn. How do you react?
Well, the irony is, in that first qualifying, he was only 0.3 off Gasly, but that's how close it is at the moment.
Right.
And therefore, to accuse Gasly of having some sort of different car to his was a little bit rich, I thought. Benefit of the doubt, I think who he's talking to is Honda and Red Bull. He's a Red Bull Junior and a Dream Team Honda winner. And what I mean by that, he comes with a sense of privilege in terms of he is a chosen one by Japan. And I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. So many times Japanese have arrived in Europe and have failed because they don't pick up the language and they don't, communicate well, and they tend not to be vociferous enough. And maybe he's kind of, as Bob says, looked at what the past has looked like and said, no, I've got to go in there and make this my own type thing, and I got to show Gasly this, and I got to show Red Bull this and Honda this, and if the car's right now, if I'm performing and the car's not performing, Honda need to know. Now, I agree with Bob though on the flip side, and I thought the most poignant thing was Jenson Button, an ex-Honda driver, Formula One driver, or with a Honda engine anyway, said exactly that, which is you don't slag off the team. That is not a way to make it in Formula One. And if anybody knows, Jenson Button knows, having won a world title. And I think Yuki, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I like him. I like his style. I like his kind of passion for the sport, which is so un-Japanese. I like the fact that he's picked up the language, albeit from Carlin and all the swear words. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But he can't keep this up because Helmut Marko does not like his cars being slagged off.
I want to read his.
He's obviously a talented kid.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just saying, I want to read his reply, his apology on Twitter. He says, I wanted to apologize for my comments today. I didn't mean to criticize the team who have done a great job all weekend. I was just frustrated with my performance. Full send tomorrow with a little rocket ship icon. So he's trying to apologize. And I mean, that's the best he can do, I suppose, at this stage.
Yeah. I mean, listen to Fernando for how long did they put up with Fernando's Honda comments? Yeah. It's like a GP2 car.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, I want to read, first of all, let me get out the phone number if people want to get up and get going and give us a call and join the show.
Or if you're on the road.
Or if you're on the road, that's right. 512-643-5483, 512-643-LIVE. And, of course, we're going to be on for the post show, so call in either one. But let me read this tweet that someone said. It's a little bit of a step back to early in the show, but it's good because Dee Nelson tweeted at us, and she said, at Bob Varsha and at Speedcaster, she said, did I hear correctly yesterday? If Lewis was a constructor, he would have the 6th most poles in F1 history.
It's true.
Right.
That is a crazy statistic, isn't it?
That is amazing. Yeah. And like I said, again, I mentioned Fernando. Remember when he first arrived, he was Fernando's teammate. That did not work out. And yet he managed to beat Fernando occasionally at the height of his powers. And they went head to head for a world title. I mean, come on.
Yeah. For one mistake in China, I think it was, Lewis would have been world champion in his rookie year, but he tossed it away through mistakes and learned from each and every one of them, which the great ones do.
Yeah. Let's talk about, Bob, you had a story you had in here about the safety car interventions in each of the last 6 races.
Yeah.
And none here last year. Is that right, Bob?
Yeah, there was no safety car in last year's race, which is unusual. As I said, we've seen them in each of the last 6 races, and those can be critical because track position is so important here at Barcelona. So when they happen, the opportunity to get in a pit stop with minimal damage, get onto the right set of tires and carry on, it could be a real turning point in the race. So we'll have to watch for that. There's lots of places to go off. A lot of guys have gone off already this weekend, but I don't think anybody ever got stuck in these gravel traps. I think the guys that went off, I think they were all able to reverse out or motor out or do whatever they did. And that too can be critical in terms of whether or not we get a local yellow flag, virtual safety car, or the real deal. So I think that's something to watch for in this race, particularly with all the aggro that's going to be going on down into turn 1. Everybody knowing they have to pick up spaces as quickly as they can.
Yeah, I think out of all the Grand Prix we've had, I think this is lining up to be probably the most intense because Verstappen is on the dirty side of the track and he's got his one. He knows that this is a chance to beat Mercedes. He's got a good car. We're finally seeing the battle we wanted between Red Bull and Mercedes. Bottas is behind Hamilton, so they should try to pair up and slipstream each other to try to block Verstappen if that's possible. But really, there's so few chances to overtake. In fact, what they were saying, I think it's 27 of the 30 races here, this is the 31st, have been won from the front row, which tells you a lot. And that is a bigger statistic than Monaco. So you could basically count the
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't realize.
Because of the pit stops and so on, and because of the nature of the circuit. So what we're saying is that first corner suddenly, because also it's a long run, so you've actually got an opportunity to get into your pace and get up to third gear, whatever it might be, because it is a long, long way down to that first corner, and it's quite an open first corner with plenty of runoffs. Sure, you could be penalised, but it's worth the risk going through 2 and 3. And we've seen, and as I said, I mentioned the Rosberg-Hamilton thing, they were neck and neck coming through 4, and that's why it ended in tears. So I think if you're Verstappen and you're Red Bull, you're thinking, right, this is our opportunity, and if we go for it, we try to do it. If we make it, we make it, and then we put our strategy together. Mercedes' strategy surely will be 1-2 at the first corner, and then we can sort it out from there.
That's a big if, because Bottas's starts have been, either very good or very bad, and he's got some real young lions behind him in Leclerc, Ocon, Sainz, Ricardo. I mean, look at Sergio Perez. He's usually kind of a rocket starter. He's starting from 8th, so he's going to try to make up ground quickly, and that's going to be a real jump ball down in turn 1, I think.
I feel, speaking of Sergio Perez, I feel like it's a Red Bull second driver curse. It's like every driver you put in there, and I don't feel like Sergio Perez is intimidated by Max Verstappen. I mean, he's been in the sport forever, but what's going on with him? Think is he still getting used to the car?
He threw it off the road on a qualifying run, but he also has been complaining about his shoulder this weekend.
Yeah,
that he's not able to drive the car at full fitness because of this problem with his shoulder.
Yeah, it's true. It seems like everybody that is in that seat so used to seeing Max in second place. It's just like he is today. And then whoever the second Red Bull driver is in 6th, 7th, or 8th or whatever, just like today.
Well, I would argue go back to Canada and Racing Point, Perez, Ocon. When you see Perez on his top of his game, he is sublime. And I think he is one of those drivers that he needs all the right package to be there. I think the first races, as Bob pointed out, Bahrain, Imola, Portugal, these aren't places that you naturally suddenly find the sweet spot. So I think it'll come, and it should be here. We should see the best race that Perez can put together in his new package. And let's watch the times between him and Verstappen, just on lap times, wherever he is on the track, because you can't guarantee that. But let's see if he gets closer to Verstappen in overall time and pace this weekend.
Yeah, I hope so. I think everybody hopes that. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take another quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue our breakdown and preparation for the Formula One Spanish Grand Prix.
I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
Hey, we heard that CrowdStrike commercial, and we're watching the television. And how about the safety car this year? That gorgeous red Mercedes GT with the big
Best it's ever looked, in my mind.
I know. We've had that gray, the silver arrow look for years, and when you see that red car now, it just pops.
Yeah, it really does.
All right, guys. Well, we are about a half hour from the race now, and a couple more stories before we start breaking down qualifying. Bob, talking about the Mercedes has been more dominant here in the hybrid era than anywhere else. It's really, we talked about Mercedes dominance earlier, but you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's just in anticipation of us trying to guess who's going to win the race. I really think Lewis Hamilton is likely to walk this race. He has led every lap in this event since lap 33 of the 2018 version. So all the rest of 2018, every lap in 2019, every lap in 2020. And, I wouldn't be surprised if something similar happens today. And this, although it's not a front row lockout for Mercedes in qualifying, that's only the second time that's happened in the last 9 years here. So, it's obviously a track that suits them well. You never know what's going to happen. And certainly Max Verstappen and that Red Bull can be a huge factor. But this has been truly a Mercedes track in a way that I don't think any other circuit has been. So, I think if you don't like seeing Mercedes and particularly Lewis Hamilton win, you're going to be a bit glum today.
Yeah,
and fun to watch.
Yeah, and watching Portugal, I think the most poignant line was by Toto Wolff, who very rarely gets on the radio, but he did say on the radio, "Hunt him down, Valtteri. You are the fastest man on the track," as a motivation. But the way that Lewis smoked his teammate once into the lead was pretty impressive. And I agree with Bob. It's like, it's going to be potentially a 1-2, but you wouldn't bet on Bottas to be the one.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, speaking of the
pressure.
Say again, Bob.
I said that Bottas is under increasing pressure.
Yeah.
He's not had a great start to the season. He trails by more than a race worth of points in the championship, and he's got to pull it together.
Yeah, and I think that line, like I said, by Toto was
Yeah.
poignant.
So how many times
got
have
the tools? Go do the job.
Yeah, and Russell's waiting in the wings.
Yeah. How many times have we seen Hamilton, Verstappen, Bottas in the last few seasons? This exact qualifying lineup.
Yeah.
I think, Bob, was it you that had the stat maybe a couple of weeks ago? But it's happened a lot, this exact lineup. And we keep thinking that this is going to prevent Mercedes 1-2s. And now that the cars are a little more equal this year, we may get that. But it's been a lot, the same exact lineup, for 3 or 4 years now.
And it's been that same exact podium.
Mm.
Well, that's
what it was.
Combination
of Hamilton, Verstappen, and Bottas. They've been on the podium together more than any other driver lineup in history. I think it's 15 times now they've been on the podium. And many of those have come at this track. So, it's no surprise that we'll see all three of them battling for the podium again today.
Yeah, it's up there with when McLaren had Senna and Prost together. I think they won 15 of the 16 races, something ridiculous like that. And, it was either one or the other. And it was a great year because of it. It was turbulent, as you could imagine, because, only one guy can win. And each week it was a fight to the death, as it were, and it ended off in tears many times. But, it's that kind of dominance.
Well, I want to talk somebody else besides Mercedes for a minute, because, in fact, we're going to talk a lot about the American influence in the sport this morning, both here in the pre-show and in the post-show, too.
I have a guest.
Yeah, we've got a guest in the post-show, Jonathan.
Jack Hawksworth, from Great Britain, racing, obviously, in IMSA now, but former IndyCar, and interestingly enough, former Xfinity driver.
Yeah, that's right. A Brit Xfinity driver.
I love that.
But we're going to talk a lot about American influence in the sport from the 5 Americans in Formula 3. Now, step back and think about that, gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking all about the path for Americans into Formula 1. We now have 4/5, depending on how you define Enzo Fittipaldi's nationality, but he's born in Miami, so we got to.
Well, and like, I don't want to say I told you so, but he's been on the show, 3 times in the last 3 months? Once with his brother when he was in Italy, getting pulled over by the police. He started off in America this season in F4, but is quickly vaunted back up to FIA F3 with Logan Sargent as a teammate in Charus Racing. And yeah, we got a Fittipaldi back in the game. I'm really excited.
So we got a lot to discuss about this. I want to start our American discussion by talking about a Russian. I want to talk about Nikita Mazepin racing for the American F1 team, the Haas F1 team. I was looking at the stats. So we've had 4 qualifications this year, 4 races, and he has not qualified better than 4/10 of Schumacher all season. So which is it, guys? Is he just need a lot of work to be done, or is Schumacher really good, or is it a little of both?
I'll refer to Bob here.
I think it's a little of both. In my heart of hearts, do I think Nikita Mazepin is a Formula One driver? No, I don't think so. This is not finishing school. This is where you're supposed to arrive as the real deal, find your place in a team, and show what you can do. You're not supposed to throw the car off the road within a couple of laps at the beginning of first practice, which Mazepin has done. We all know about his background, and that's, we try to put that aside and just judge him on what he's done on track. He's been last everywhere, as John pointed out. He's barely within a half second of his teammate on the racetrack. And we don't know how good Mick Schumacher will eventually be. But thus far, I think Nikita Mazepin has shown that he's really not up to it. And how long do you give the kid to come good? Not that as I said, this is not where you come to hone your skills. You're supposed to have those skills when you get here, and it's not without noting that the last 2 cars on the grid are both sons of billionaires who have enormous investments in the teams. And as we've talked about a million times, money is where it's at in Formula One and always has been, even for the greatest stars. But, Michael Schumacher, somebody paid his way, Peter Sauber did actually, to get Michael Schumacher into Formula One. He qualified way above where that Jordan should have at Spa back in the early 90s. I mean, that's what you do. You come and you make an impression right away. And you don't spend time, drawing red flags.
I'll never forget John Lacey's arrival. Same thing. He just drove the wheels off a car that didn't have any, performance.
Right. Material. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree with Bob on that. But I do want to make a caveat. So just because, let's just put it in perspective for the American fans who want more. I get it. But Formula One is different when it comes to this, which is Gene Haas, you're wearing the hat, was about to play. He's got a successful NASCAR team, a very successful NASCAR team. Gene Haas told Gunther Steiner he was pulling out of Formula One. He wasn't going to commit last July to another 5 years unless he could see some light at the end of the tunnel. Gunther worked his magic by convincing him of 2 things. 1, sign up for the 5-year deal. We'll get there. 2, let's get rid of the money that we're paying these 2 drivers that, frankly, are disenfranchised because we can't give them a car that is good enough yet. Let's take Ferrari's protege, Mick Schumacher, and a protege for Formula One. No harm, no foul. And we're already seeing he's half a second each weekend better. And I'm really impressed with Mick in a poor car. He's doing in a Lacey, and we haven't seen the best of him yet. I don't think he's compared to John Lacey.
Given Latifi a run for his money.
And by the way, he is the top of the crop. He is the George Russell of his era, and he has performed that way since he arrived. Sure, he's got a target on his back with that name, but he's also done a Stroll, which is he's won pretty much everything he's been put into on his way up to Formula One. So
arguably better than Stroll.
Yes and no. Mick didn't win everything, and he had a strange path. He went all over Asia and around the world, whereas Stroll won every championship he was in on the way up to Formula One. I think but people need to understand, Mazepin is there for one reason. He is bankrolling the team in 2021, or Dimitri, his father is. They're getting a lot of Ukali sponsorship coverage, hence the Russian flag and so on. We've seen it before with Maldonado and, the Venezuelan oil money. We've seen it with Pedro Diniz. This is not new to Formula One. And sometimes you need money to go racing and to get you through a stopgap. And that's what they've chosen to do. So, and by the way, Steiner has confirmed that to us in person.
Yeah. Yeah, he said it exactly those words. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I said we wouldn't be here without that money. Yep.
Yeah. All right,
What
guys.
about the rumor, Jonathan? The rumor that we're hearing that Haas may actually sell the team to Dmitry Mazepin down the road.
I asked that question to Gunter last year when it happened. I said, "Is this a Lance Stroll deal whereby he gets an influence in the team and then eventually takes over the ownership of the team? Is that a possibility?" And Gunter said, "No, that's not where we're going." But I'm with you, and it's more than I think it's a definite, true potential business decision for Gene Haas if he's had enough of finishing 8th, 9th, 10th.
I do not want that to happen, gentlemen. So
in the championship, I mean.
All right, we're right up against the break. Let's go and get the break in, and then we're going to talk up and down the grid from qualifying and get in some stories about all of our favorite drivers, including the resurgence of Daniel Ricciardo this weekend, the Ferrari cars, Ocon, all that. So you listen to Speed City live from Austin, Texas, back after a short break.
Hi, this is Gene Haas, and this is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
Has your workforce moved from the office to the home or the garage or maybe a rented cabin with open Wi-Fi? If your company has expanded outside the office and moved all your applications to the cloud, there's a whole new world of threats that you have to worry about, including ransomware. CrowdStrike revolutionized security by harnessing the speed and the power of the cloud to identify and stop the most advanced cyber attacks, even those that have never been seen before. So now you can work securely anywhere. Try CrowdStrike Falcon free today and protect your data and employees anywhere. Welcome to Anywhere, CrowdStrike. We stop breaches across the CrowdStrike Falcon platform free at crowdstrike.com/anywhere. All right, gentlemen, we are about 12 minutes from the race. I want to go down qualifying, the order of qualifying first, and then let's have some discussion about each one of those. So Lewis Hamilton on pole, Max Verstappen right behind him, 0.03 of a second away. Valtteri Bottas in the other Mercedes, then Charles Leclerc. Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari. Daniel Ricciardo in the McLaren. Sergio Perez in 8th place. Lando Norris in 9th. Fernando Alonso in 10th. Aston Martin's Lance Stroll in 11th, and Pierre Gasly, Sebastian Vettel, Antonio Giovinazzi, George Russell, Yuki Tsunoda, Kimi Räikkönen, Mick Schumacher, and then bringing up the rear, Nicholas Latifi and Nikita Mazepin. So, Jonathan, I know you're excited to talk about these because there's lots of good stories, but after Lewis Hamilton, we talked about it a lot, and Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas, we got Charles Leclerc in fourth.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly going back to Verstappen, the reason I say Verstappen's going for it is obvious. It's Verstappen for one.
Yeah.
But two, he's on his own. And what's interesting this year, and Bob just mentioned this in the break, how the pairings, it used to be 2x2, like the Arc, but it's not anymore, is it, Bob? And so really they're working. It's not random, but it's a very interesting grid, the way that the teams are split, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I think it says something about the competitiveness of Formula One right now. Of course, we always say that your biggest rival is your teammate, and what we're seeing is that these tenths of a second or less are splitting things up. They're not 2x2 on the grid. There's not big gaps between the quality of one team and the quality of the next team. I think driver ability is really showing through. Technical advances are really showing through. Look at what Alpine has been doing and what particularly McLaren has been doing to push their car to the front. And that they're pushing so hard, you're not going to have both drivers getting there together. The smallest mistake is going to drop one driver a little bit further back. So the fact that they're not lining up 2x2 down the grid tells us that the teams are not only trying hard, but that the drivers are as well. And sometimes we find them scattered throughout the field. I think it's a fascinating element of this year's competitive lineup.
Yeah, no question.
And we've talked about the circuit here in Barcelona. We always think of at the beginning of the year, you think, okay, when we get to Barcelona, like you said, Jonathan, it's the beginning of the season, but it's also kind of been that benchmark. If you're fast here, you're going to be fast. I don't know if that's really true anymore.
I think you're right, and I think that as the sport evolves and as COVID has thrown in a bit of a spanner in the wheels of all sorts of things, and we are looking at a new era, a different era, although the same names are creaming to the top, so to speak. We've been through, and so has Formula One, a quite cathartic kind of year. Where you don't know where you're going to race next. You don't know whether you're going to race back to back. You don't know whether you're going to race in Austria week on week. It's been. We'll look back in history and go, wow, it was amazing that Mercedes managed to stay on top of it, or were they, or was everybody struggling and they just dealt with the struggle better?
Yeah, and think about the conditions under which they're doing it, John. I think you put this note out there. Mercedes-Benz posted their financial reports, in which it said they spent $400-something million chasing the World Championship last year and got it. This year, the spending cap is at $145 million, and I know Toto Wolff has been very outspoken about how many people they've had to let go, how much they've tried to scrimp and save, even for an outfit as big and red carpet as Mercedes-Benz. They've felt the bite of the new spending regulations, and yet they continue to excel.
And that's another master move by Gunther Steiner and Haas, because they have inherited several key members of the Ferrari team who have done exactly the same thing. They've got a chassis guy, and let's face it, that's part of what Haas's problem has been. They've always had a good Ferrari engine or a bad Ferrari engine, whatever Ferrari are producing, but we think it's a good one this time, and it seems to be. But now they've got some key guys, and they're building a factory for 80 people right outside Maranello. So, this is a gain, and you're right. All the teams at that level that are spending over $300-400 million are having to cap big time and having to, jettison some really good talent.
All right, let's move down the grid in qualifying. So let's talk about Ferrari and Alpine. We got Charles Leclerc in fourth, Esteban Ocon in fifth, Carlos Sainz, the other Ferrari, in sixth, and Daniel Ricciardo and the Mercedes in seventh. This is a really exciting right behind the front of the grid.
Oh, I mean, you can't get... I mean, let's just take the top three out of it, and let's just say they go off into the distance. I'd be happy watching Ocon fight Sainz, fight Ricciardo, fight Perez, fight Norris, and fight Alonso. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
Leclerc,
come on.
Yeah.
And Leclerc, sorry. That's great.
Yeah, Bob, are you excited about this? It's a nice lineup right behind the Red Bulls and the Mercedes.
Absolutely. I'm giving myself a headache trying to do the math in my head about the time differences between fourth place and let's stop with Perez down in eighth place. I mean, you're talking 0.2 of a second.
Yeah.
Think about that on the racetrack. Put two cars at
Yeah.
200 miles an hour,
Yeah.
0.2 of a second apart. How big is that gap? Maybe like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And that, is going to put it down to the drivers. The cars are, more or less equal. So it's the nut behind the wheel that's going to make the difference.
I love that expression. Also, look at Lance Stroll, first guy to be able to choose tyres. Everybody else is on soft because of qualifying. So just to explain that in layman's terms, you pick your tyres in Q2, and that's what you roll with for the start of the race.
Yeah.
But if you miss out on the top 10, it's open season. And so therefore, he may choose to go on the mediums. But as I was listening to Checkered Flag, and my learned friend, Mr. Jolyon Palmer, said, yeah, that's true. He may go on mediums, but you lose grip into the first corner. And so it's a double-edged
Do you lose
sword.
a spot or two to begin to gain those spots back, a lap or two down the road?
Yeah. And certainly if you could see Stroll.
It's a big...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's a big time difference. Maybe the biggest we've seen so far this year. 0.8 of a second from soft to medium, and about a full second from medium to hard. So be careful which tires you choose.
Yeah, good point. But if he goes for a long run, Stroll, compared to the guys on the softer tires, that could vaunt him up the grid. And maybe that's the thought process. But that's what they're dealing with, just so you know.
Yeah, 2-stop race at least.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, good point. I love all these discussions, and then when the race starts, everything
it all goes out the window.
All goes to hell and out the window, and we don't know what we get. But
CrowdStrike get lots of coverage with their safety car.
With their safety car, yeah. All right, so looking past Lance Stroll, you got Pierre Gasly. I mean, continue down. There's all this potential great racing all the way down because then you have Gasly right behind him, who's had he's looked great the last couple of years. And then Sebastian Vettel, who's been resurging a little bit. I mean, has Sebastian Vettel looked a little better? Let's talk about that. I mean, Bob, you talked about him always needing the right car, but he's looked better in the last race and a half here.
Well, he has. You mentioned Gasly, and I thought it was a shock that he didn't make Q3. Also, that Vettel, now granted, he went 14, 15 races without making Q3, and he's trying to get used to this new Aston Martin race car. But he has yet to score a point this year, and to me, that's a bit of a shock. And I was a bit surprised, too, that he didn't make Q3.
Yeah. Yeah, a bit of a shock
George
for
Russell,
sure.
too, I thought was there's fast guys coming from the back again.
We skipped over, we touched on it, but what about Daniel Ricciardo? Lando Norris has looked fantastic, and Daniel Ricciardo's still getting used to the car or whatever the case may be. What do you think it is, Jonathan?
I think it's just that. I don't think he's having a performance lull in any way. I think he's getting used to the car. I mean, look how close he's been with Norris. Norris has out-qualified him, but that's not surprising. He's been there a fair, it is Norris's team at the moment.
Yeah, but it is Daniel Ricciardo, too.
Yeah, I agree. And here will come. Look at Alonso. I think today, keep an eye on Ricciardo and an eye on Alonso and see if they're back.
Yeah. All right, well, we're under 3 minutes left in our show, and then we're going to go right out to the BBC's coverage of the play-by-play of the Spanish Grand Prix. So before we go, I want to do our predictions. But before we do that, I want to tease the post-race show because, Bob, you touched on it a minute ago when you said how we used to see the cars line up 2 by 2 by 2, depending on the manufacturer's car more than anything, right? Well, now it's so tight right now, you don't see it. Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, whatever, down the grid, it's all split up. And we're going to talk about the driver pairings in the post-race show. There's so much to analyze, speaking of Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris, but we've got all the way from Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas to all the way down to Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher. So we got all these driver pairings we're going to talk about. And also in the post-race show, we're going to go in-depth on all the American influence in F1, including those 5 drivers in FIA
Which
Formula
you can
3.
watch on ESPN.
That's right. You can watch all those on ESPN. So there's a lot of discussion. All right, we got 2 minutes left. Let's start with you, Mr. Bob Varsha. What do you think about – I'll throw you under the bus
Throw
first.
you under the Lions, to the Lions.
What do you think about the finish today? Who are you predicting?
I'm predicting, as I said earlier, I think Lewis Hamilton is going to win this race. I think he'll win it handily. I don't think it'll be a Mercedes 1-2, and I think you're going to see something special off the podium. I think Daniel Ricciardo and the McLaren is going to do something special today. We may see him as high as fourth, and we'll let it all shake out. But I see Hamilton winning the race.
Can I do a head and heart?
Yes, I do like that. Who you want to win, and then who do you think's going to win, and then you really emotionally want to win.
First corner pile up, Leclerc to win.
Oh, wow.
That's my heart.
Yeah.
My head, Hamilton.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to follow that up with head and heart, and I'll copy you, but not. I'm going to say first corner pile up. Somehow Lando Norris comes out for the win.
Yay!
That's who I'd really like to see win. And I'm not some over the top McLaren fan like a lot.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, but I do love Lando Norris. He's just been so fun for the
He's
sport.
a great character.
I mean, and having he and Ricciardo on the same team. But then, of course, I'll go with you guys and say Hamilton for the win.
There you go. All right.
But the day is coming. The day is coming.
Yeah.
And we're going to see something special at the top of the podium.
Yeah, no doubt.
Just not today.
All right, gentlemen. Well, we are out of time, so stick with us right here on this Channel 81 for the race. But remember, we will be back with our full 1-hour post-race show. And write this phone number down if you want to call in and give your opinion, 512-643-5483. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you after the race.